and money went under the mattress.
The stock market crash in 1929 did not create the Great Depression, but it did start a sequence of events that eventually culminated with the Great Depression.
Well, you know, some of this is going to sound sort of familiar. The banks were loaning money for the stock market, the companies were loaning money, the brokerages were loaning money, and when those prices fell, all that money just disappeared. Almost immediately, companies began to feel the pinch of not having the capital and having lost money, and they began to lay off people, to let people go, to shut down production.
There were mass bankruptcies. There was a liquidity crisis of exactly the same kind we have today. That is to say, all kinds of businesses could no longer get loans to keep themselves afloat, even if those businesses were entirely solvent. They couldn't get the kind of short-term commercial credit to pay their workers, to buy new inventory, to pay their suppliers. And so they began going bankrupt. And as they went bankrupt, they laid people off. And as they laid people off, demand fell. And this is what does traumatic damage to the whole society, so traumatic that it's second only to the Civil War in American memory as a tragic moment in American history.
My father had a modest-sized insurance brokerage agency. One night at dinner, my father said that he had to fire an employee. And I very cavalierly said, well, he'll be able to get a job, won't he? And my father said, no. He's an older man who isn't very capable, and I don't think he can. And at that point, my father burst into tears. It was the first time I had ever seen my father cry.
There was such a change in our lives and all the people around me after the crash. Many of my girlfriend's fathers lost their jobs, and they couldn't pay the rent. They were evicted. The poverty was really all around us. Men had no clothing. They were in rags, really rags. They used to wrap their feet up in newspaper and put them in cardboard, makeshift shoes to walk around the street. And then if you took a walk over to Central Park, you saw this big area, a deserted reservoir that had been drained. And they made little huts of cardboard boxes, and they would sleep there overnight. And they called it Hooverville, because that was the name of our president at the time. And of course, all this stock market crash and all this poverty was, of course, put in his lap. It was really, really pitiful.
Like many others, the photographer Alice Austen struggled to keep up mortgage payments as the Great Depression took hold.
A few years into the Depression, Alice Austen runs out of money. There is nothing left. She's out of her house. They take her to a poorhouse, and it's a poorhouse out of a Dickens novel, and she lingers there for a couple of years. Miraculously, her photographs are discovered. A few of her photos are sold to Time and Life magazine, and that earns her enough money to move out of the poorhouse and into a decent retirement home. In a sense, her photographs come to her rescue and take her out of poverty and into a year or two of decent living.
Paul Warburg, who so accurately predicted the crash and the Depression, saved the bank he ran from disaster by getting out of the market in time. But it was of little consolation to him.
My great-grandfather probably never really recovered his own personal equilibrium after the crash. To be called the Cassandra of Wall Street, I think was very painful for him. And if we all remember Cassandra, she couldn't just see the future. She was also doomed to be disregarded. And I think it caused him to go into a depression of his own. I'm not sure that he ever would have said, "I told you so." I think he felt that it was really tragic that this worldwide depression could have been averted or headed off, or at least it didn't have to crash so hard. And I think it probably led to his early death. When he died, it was the last year of Hoover's presidency, and there was no end in sight.
But in 1932, 12 years of Republican rule came to an end.
I, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, do solemnly swear that I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States.
Democrat Franklin Roosevelt was elected president in a landslide victory. His first task was to restore confidence.
The only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
Seen as a savior, Roosevelt promised a new deal for the American people and to regulate the financial system.
There must be a strict supervision of all banking and credit and investment. There must be an end to speculation with other people's money.
The new president acted quickly. He guaranteed